This will be a place of congregation, of order, of peace, of prayer, of hope, of humility.
My very pleasant and privileged duty this morning to welcome you all on behalf of the Ismaili community as we are gathered here to mark an event of deep spiritual and historic significance for the members of our faith. Today's ceremony will mark the establishment of our first Jamaat Khana to be built in Canada, which has been designated as one of our national Silver Jubilee projects to commemorate the Silver Jubilee of His Highness the Aga Khan. It is indeed appropriate that this Jamaat Khana should be in Burnaby, since our first congregation was organized here some 10 years ago.
Today is a particularly significant and indeed happy occasion for the Ismaili community in Canada and for my wife and for me. I am most grateful to Your Excellency, the Lieutenant Governor, for honoring us with your presence and for performing the foundation ceremony of the Burnaby Jamaat Khana. I succeeded my grandfather to the office of Imam in 1957, and just 2 weeks ago, on the 11th of July, I entered the 25th year of my imamate. During the Jubilee year, many new projects will be launched which will impact the material quality of the life of Ismailis, as indeed of many others, in the fields of health, education, housing, and rural development, particularly in the Third World. Why then should today's simple ceremony on the periphery of Vancouver in Western Canada be so significant to so many members of my community and to me? In the past 24 years, Ismaili Jamaat Khanas have been built around the world. I have only very rarely attended the foundation ceremony of a Jamaat Khana, and I have never traveled so far to do so. But this is the first project to be launched during this Jubilee year, and it is very important that it is a place of worship. Burnaby also has a particular significance, since it was here, as has already been mentioned, that the first congregation of my community was established in Canada. The significance of this ceremony is further enhanced by the fact that this is the first Jamaat Khana to be built in North America, in Canada, a country of the New World, which has extended the hand of friendship to countless peoples from all over the world, including Ismailis. And while Canada may not be unique in welcoming the victimized to her shores, where she stands very nearly alone is in her encouragement to her new citizens to maintain their traditions and customs, an encouragement that is, in my view, a particularly wise and mature expression of democratic freedom.
We're delighted to be part of this celebration of the Silver Jubilee of His Highness Assumption of the Imamate of the Shia Imami Ismaili Muslims, to be with you on this historic occasion, the commencement of construction of the Jamaat Khana, which is to rise on this site. I now have the great honor to join His Highness the Aga Khan in unveiling this plaque, which will signify commencement of construction of the Ismaili Muslim Jamaat Khana, which will be an inspiration for many generations to come to this community in the service of Islam and Canada.
President Karim, President Virji, thank you so much for making time for us today. We're going to walk down memory lane, and we just saw that clip of the foundation ceremony. That was 1982. There was nothing here. What was it like being at that ceremony? What went through your mind watching that clip?
It brought a lot of memories and a great deal of emotion, because it was a very challenging time getting to the foundation ceremony, because there'd been a construction strike, and we could only do the preparations in the 10-day window that we had to get everything together. It was almost miraculous. So it was a huge sense of relief, excitement, and a sense of history. Because for the first time in 1400 years of our history, a Jamaat Khana was being established in Canada. It was the first project of the Silver Jubilee year, and Hazrat Imam or His Highness to the non-Ismaili audience, had said that it was very rare for the Imam of the time to travel so far for a foundation ceremony. But the foundation ceremony denoted the Imam's desire that this should be our permanent home. This is such a powerful message, and it was a message that the Imam repeated later in the day and on the time of his departure. Make Canada your permanent home, your children's home, and their children's home.
Speaking as one of those children of the first batch of refugees to come to Canada, it's hard for some of the younger generation to imagine a time when there weren't purpose-built Jamaat Khanas. But as this community began as an immigrant and a refugee population, we had to start from nothing. So where were prayers being held? Where did the Jamaat congregate?
When we first came, there were no Jamaat Khanas here at all. And we used to meet in homes. And our prayers were once a month in a private gathering in a home. Dinner would be served afterwards. And then we grew up to being 50, 60, 70 people, and we went and rented space at Edmonds Khane, at what was Edmonds Building, 500 square feet. And we literally put sheets on the floor because we had no other way of covering up the floors.
This was an office building?
It was an office building. We rented space, 500 square feet, and literally sheets were on the floor, and we set it up. Then suddenly we started getting more and more people coming in. The Tanzanian influx took place, and that was in 71, before the Ugandan influx. So from 500, we acquired 1,000 square feet. And then after the Tanzanian influx, we found that we just couldn't keep up. So we opened up a Jamaat Khana in Chilliwack. But Jamaat Khanas used to be either school halls or warehouses. And that's how it expanded from that one single spot to where we are today.
So the need for a place to congregate was obvious. The question, though, is where. So what would it look like? And we'll get to that in a minute. But how was this particular site in Burnaby chosen?
Okay, what happened in 1976, we got a directive from the Supreme Council from Nairobi saying we are surprised that you're still congregating at the Edmonds Jamaat Khana site. So after 76, when I was Secretary of the Council, our first order of business was to find a permanent, safe place. Because I'm in the real estate business, I came across a site which was in receivership. It was zoned specifically for church use or public assembly. So I said to myself, well, if we make an application here, there's no way council can deny us the right to worship on a site designated for church use. Little did we know what sort of public protests that would arise at the rezoning hearings.
Well, now, before we get into the actual opening, I wanted to talk about the coin ceremony. This was another ceremony that happened. A lot of people don't really know about it, but let's take a look. So I only found out about this coin ceremony a few days ago, and it actually reminds me of during the 2010 Olympics, the guy who made the ice at Rogers Arena, he put a lucky loonie at center ice, and that's how that ceremony spoke to me. But tell us about the reasoning behind it. What does it mean?
So we decided to have a coin ceremony, and traditionally, when you give coins for good luck. Even at our weddings, we exchange gifts for good luck. And there was also a time capsule that was put into the hole, and the idea was 50 years from now, or from that date, it would be opened. Now, don't ask me where you're going to find it, because I don't think anybody's kept record of it. But that's what happened. So if you look at the movie, all the Mukhi Kamryas, or our lay ministers, are there, members of council and volunteers, and by everybody putting in a coin, everybody had a sense of participation.
It is like a democratization.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
It was such a momentous day. When you think back to that day, what goes through your mind? What do you feel about it?
It was an incredible day from many, many respects. First, we were a community that had arrived here only 13 years ago. We had the Prime Minister of Canada performing the opening ceremony with Maulana Hazrat Imam, who came for the occasion. And we had a whole host of dignitaries that came. And I remember standing outside the courtyard with Prince Amin receiving all the invited guests. And Farouk came with Maulana Hazrat Imam, and then Maulana Hazrat Imam, and then Prince Amin was there, then Premier Bill Bennett of BC was there. And the ceremony took place right in the courtyard. Beautiful day, limited number of people. And Hazrat Imam's speech and Mulroney's speech was just so awe-inspiring. But basically, the fact that in less than 13 years we have this magnificent building, and we have the Prime Minister of Canada coming in for the opening.
Wow. President Verji, that must have felt like a sense of accomplishment from when you had optioned that land to seeing it built and then opened. What was it like for you that day?
I never imagined in 1977, when the land was tied up, that on the actual day of the opening, I would be sitting on stage with the Prime Minister of Canada, His Highness, Her Highness the Begum, Prince Abid, Premier Bill Bennett, and half a dozen senior federal and provincial ministers. And I guess what really excited me was His Highness had never met Premier Bill Bennett. So we had asked the Premier that since you've never met His Highness, would you please receive him on arrival? So Premier Bill Bennett welcomed His Highness at the Ismaili Jamaat Khana Center, and then His Highness received Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. And to have the Prime Minister of the country acknowledging our presence as part of this country was an absolutely remarkable moment, that we had actually arrived, that the government of Canada acknowledges our presence as a permanent part of the mosaic. The Imam had been telling us from day one, make Canada your home, make it your children's home, make it your grandchildren's home. And if I can say on an aside, some years ago when a Ugandan delegation came here and they noticed that this Jamaat Khan had been opened by the Prime Minister of Canada, their one remark was, we have all lost something, and we want you to come back and help us rebuild our country. That's a wonderful testament of how a community displaced was able to pull itself up. Why? Because this is an amazing country. This country welcomes refugees, gives them more than an even chance to get up. So the moment you arrive in Canada, you're not here as a refugee. You are a new Canadian. Everywhere else, you're an immigrant. Think about it. And I'm talking to your generation, because you don't have this crisis of identity that we had. When we came, we had a crisis of identity.
It is a physical representation of the roots that we have put down in this country. I want to talk about the architecture of the building in a moment, but first, the design that we see here that we're all familiar with is not what was originally planned. Tell us about the so-called supermarket, because that's what I heard it was.
Yeah, let me explain to you how the supermarket building came about. When we originally optioned the land and we had to go for a rezoning, we had to go with a scheme to Burnaby Council.
You mean a design schematic?
Design scheme,
okay.
Just a preliminary. So there was a developer willing to buy the land, put up a building of 10,000 square feet, which could be converted to an alternate use at the end of a 10-year lease. We're going to rent the building for 10 years. So we said, design it in such a way it can be converted to an alternate use, and put in some arches so it looks like an institutional building. It's no longer a warehouse, it's no longer an office building. It's a building which has some attraction. And Burnaby Department of Planning was so excited, they said, we really want to show off this building. As things evolved, there came a time when there was so much protest, we were forced to excavate the site and put the building further down. But that's how the whole thing evolved.
So we have this grand building. There's courtyards, there's staircases, and it's all meant to function in a certain way. It is a journey. Tell us about this deliberate design journey.
It starts from the moment you arrive at the entrance, and there's a deliberate pause whether you make a left or a right, and then you come across in your parking area and you enter in humility through the walls. And as soon as you enter with humility, you don't go. And you have a huge garden there, which is in Islamic concept, is a paradise on earth. And then you have the huge arch that's just, from there you go in, and you have the fountain at the back, and the octagonal feature of the building, which is present everywhere, wherever you go, and the calligraphy that you see written everywhere, and the tapestry that adorns the walls. And so all of these were a very symbolic aspect of Islamic architecture, but a long way from arches and that kind of a design.
I feel like when you enter this space, you hear the fountain, you smell the flowers, you feel the light, there's warmth from it. There really is something for all of the senses as you enter.
If I may say so, the idea is you come through the courtyard, be in a contemplative mood, ready for prayer. So by the time you enter the prayer hall, you've already experienced a little bit of the life hereafter. Like in a sense, you're in paradise. There's water, there's vegetation, plant materials everywhere. You go into the prayer hall, you come out again, and you're back in the courtyard. You come out in peace. Islam is a religion of peace. It's up to its followers to conduct themselves and to reflect the faith in a peaceful way.
When it comes to the many architectural features of this building, there is so much to talk about, but we want to talk about what is your favorite part of the Ismaili Center?
My personal favorite part is the prayer hall. And to add to it is the prayer hall is a perfect square. And in our tradition, the center is within, because meditation is such an important and essential part of the practice of our faith. The ritual is there, but the meditation part is extremely important. And light of Allah, is demonstrated by having those beautiful windows, which in the daytime reflect like a blue light, in the evening it's like a honey light, but it's the same light. It's like Allah appears in different shapes, different places, in different parts of the world, but the light of Allah is the same. That's what it is.
President Karim, what is your favorite part of this building?
I would concur with Farooq. The purpose of coming here from the moment you arrive is to leave the material world behind. And for me, the most important part is the journey into the prayer hall itself. And the prayer hall itself is just so soothing and symbolic, and with the flow of the light and the wooden paneling and the carpet on the floor and the octagonal features. It's just an incredibly soothing site, very conducive to inner peace and search.
I love the use of all of the natural material in this building as well. Even though concrete is a modern building implement, there is so much beautiful natural stone and woodworking, and I feel that that really speaks to Old World and New World as well.
That's right. And you know, the screens have these medallions which say Ali, Allah, Muhammad. And that speaks to the Ismaili tradition. Within the Muslim community, we all believe in the oneness of God, Allah. We all acknowledge Prophet Muhammad as the final messenger of God. But in the Ismaili tradition, we say Hazrat Ali is the first Imam, and His Highness Prince Karim Aga Khan is the 49th Imam. So we are the only Muslim community with a traditional hereditary leader. So that's what it is reflected in the screens. I'll tell you the reaction I've had of people who visited the Ismaili Jamaat Khana in the prayer hall, the first comment is, gosh, this place is so peaceful. It has an aura of peacefulness. But that is something only you can feel. It's not something visual. It's something you have to feel from within.
Just to add to what Farooq is saying, I must have conducted tours of maybe 1,500 people over time. And I'm talking about Ismailis and non-Ismailis. And every time there's been a feeling of awe, feeling of peace, tranquility, and it resonates with anybody that comes in a very positive way.
You know, how do you feel when you see this facility being used for high-profile events?
So just wanted to say something, and I don't know how inner sanctuary you would be, but if you look at the concept of Islam, and Hazrat Muhammad has spoken even at the parliament, that Islam, that the material and the spiritual coexist side by side. And it's very much at the path of our fundamentals of our faith, din and dunya. And the way the facilities are used, so right now you'll have Qawwali singers outside. You'll have prayers inside. We've had lecture series here devoted to the Imam or the Institute or one of their works. So it's a building that comforts with what the Islam is all about, the material and the spiritual.
From the opening until now, when you see high-profile events being held here, how do you feel about that? What goes through your mind?
Well, it's a source of immense pride. But more importantly, our Imam, His Highness, has said, this is an ambassadorial building. It is an opportunity to build relations with people of other faiths and other communities to help the general community have a better understanding of Islam. There is Islamic art, there is Islamic architecture, there is Islamic poetry, and this Jamaat Khana, this center provides a platform to promote that thinking and open people's minds to what Islam is. And that's what it's all about.
In terms of what this building would mean for the future of the Jamaat in this country, what was His Highness's vision for what this building would represent?
If you think about it, I think our understanding of it has evolved over time. But in Islam, again, going back to the basic, the material and the spiritual coexist side by side. So for example, we have our prayer house, which is a very serene place for inner peace and contemplation. But you can go in the courtyard and you have a wedding, like your wedding. You know, there's a wedding there, there's happy people, there's food being served. Or we have Qawwali singers that have performed outside in the courtyard. So they're there. Or you can just sit in the evening by the courtyards. Or you can come here for an intellectual lecture series. Or you can come here for a citizenship ceremony. So we've encompassed everything that's of life with material and the spiritual combined. And I think that's a reflection. That's what it is for me.
I was going to ask how this building influenced or paved the way for some of the other Ismaili centers and high-profile buildings that came afterwards.
Well, the first one was London. First Ismaili center to be established in the New World, or in the Western world, was London. And then this was the second one. And then, of course, now you've got half a dozen. Dubai, Dushanbe, Tajikistan.
So what were the learnings that were taken?
In the Canadian context, Jamaat Khanas were never going to be the same again. So after this, say in Vancouver, we got the Lions Gate and we got the Burnaby Lake, and we evolved. Our understanding of design, beauty, architecture evolved over time in our appreciation. So since that time, what we've done is incorporated a lot of things from this building into these other Jamaat Khanas. And imagine a child when we were here who grew up in a school hall or a warehouse in Richmond or on Pemberton Road in North Vancouver, and then coming in and seeing something like this, and then all the other Jamaat Khanas. So our whole concept changed over time.
So we've come such a long way as a community from having no purpose-built Jamaat Khanas to having so many, and this being the first in this country. When you come here, whether it's for a community event or for prayers, when you walk through that courtyard and into the archways, what goes through your mind? Do you feel a sense of accomplishment, or I did this, or I helped make this possible? What do you think about?
What I feel whenever I come here, I always go back and think of Imam's inspiration and guidance that brought us to this day. And there are times when I go through some very, very challenging times personally. And when I come to this Jamaat Khana for prayer, and I say to myself, well, if you could spend 8 years working on this project, as long as you have faith in your Imam, everything will be taken care of. And everything does get taken care of. But we all have periods when we are feeling down, and we begin to question, will things ever get better? Or is there a solution to my problems? And the solution to our problems is through prayer. Prayers move mountains. But you have to believe in that.
What about you? What do you think when you come here?
Tremendous source of pride. An educational journey brought about by the Imam. It is his vision, his guidance. We would have never understood this kind of thing. It wasn't within our grasp to understand everything you see around us. It was literally his vision, and there are many other stories aside we can tell you about, how those chandeliers came about or stuff, but that's just digressing. But it was an educational journey for the entire Jamaat. So when we come, when a child that is born here and brought up, this is what he sees. As opposed to us, I grew up in Edmonds, in a makeshift Jamaat Khana with sheets on the floor. Or we had Pemberton Khane in the warehousing area in North Vancouver. From there to here, it's a huge leap, and the place is very serene, very peaceful, very contemplative. It's inducive to all the feelings of spirit that it generates in a human being.
You touched on something that spoke to me, because when I was growing up, when I was a little girl, this building wasn't here. So this is the first purpose-built Jamaat Khana I went to, and it always has held a place of wonderment for me. But I think it also speaks to identity. And when I come here, I feel a sense of belonging. What do you think this building speaks to in terms of our identity as Canadian Ismailis?
I think it says that we are part and parcel of the mosaic. We're at peace with the community at large. There was so much fear when we went to the public hearings. That who are these people? Why do they want a prayer house here? Is there going to be a muezzin calling the faithful to prayer at 4 a.m? All sorts of misconceptions. And it would be dishonest for me to say there wasn't an element of prejudice. And there was also fear that property prices here could drop if this Jamaat Khana was approved. I mean, that's how challenging it was. It was a tough time for council to make a decision, which they knew was not a popular decision, but it was the right decision. You cannot deny a faith community the right to worship.
What does this building mean in terms of our Ismaili identity in Canada to you?
I think it speaks to the openness of the country, the generosity of the country, the inclusiveness of the country. And for us to have the freedom of that space, for us to practice our faith in the way we see fit.
In peace.
Absolutely in peace. And it is what basically the country allows. And the Imam's vision was what you see in here.
What do you see the role of this building being in the future? How would you like to see it used?
I would like to see more and more young people come to this facility. When we talk about prominent people, I would like to see more school children come here and have a better understanding of what Islam represents. Because if you're a young person and you just watch television, people don't read very much, or you follow the social media, you won't have much understanding. But if you actually come here, meet people, spend some time here, we're not out there to convert anybody, but it gives them a better understanding of who are Muslims, who are Ismailis. And I think that is where the thrust has to be. Education, education, education.
I know when I come to this Jamaat Khana, I feel like I've come home. It speaks to the permanent presence of our community in this country. And for me, as a young Ismaili, it conveys a sense of belonging. But what do you see as the role this building plays in the identity of this community, and what does it make you feel? That this came together within, 13 years of the Jamaat initially coming to Canada. What does that say about what we can do as a community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What it says is that this country gives you so much freedom to achieve whatever you want to. The environment is very welcoming. Very, very welcoming. And the sky's the limit.
Tell me what you think about the statement that this building is an anchor.
It's anchor that means it's a reminder that this is your permanent home. Not just Jamaat Khana. Canada is your permanent home. There can be no greater statement about the permanency of the Jamaat than to say this Jamaat Khana represents the fact that this is your permanent home.
I think structurally this building strikes that balance. We have modern and we have old world design elements, building elements. Talk a little bit about what we see in this room here, because we've got beautiful tapestries juxtaposed with some very modern building materials in here.
You know, one of the favorite quotes I have of the Imam is, modernity and tradition go hand in hand. So if you're going to be modern, doesn't mean you have to do away with your traditions. If you're going to hold on to your traditions, that doesn't mean you're old-fashioned. So your history is there, but it has to move with the times. We have an Imam who leads us in accordance with the times. So this building is a reflection of that. Now it's for the next generation to take you a step further.
So we were talking about old world, new world, traditional, modern. Maybe talk about a couple of things in this room, like the tapestries and the lighting fixtures.
I come in here first as a person, as a human being, then as an Ismaili. That I am an Ismaili and I'm very conscious of who I am. And the architecture and the surrounding anchors me to a past, from the Fatimid past, the continuation of the Ismailism from that time. And a lot of the elements here haven't changed. The octagonal features, the calligraphy on the walls, the medallions, everything that you see is just anchored into a past, but in a modern setting. It's not something that's gaudy, doesn't have archways, doesn't have color, but it just takes us back to the past. And even the domes you see up there, they're very, very, very subtle. They conform to these Islamic concepts, and yet it has a very subtle presence there.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. You can only tell these stories because both of you were there during that foundational time in our history, and I want to thank you for sharing that as well as for your leadership during that time for us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is an honor to provide closing remarks for today's special event. I would first like to express our sincere gratitude to President Verji and President Karim for sharing so generously their time and their reflections with us today. We are indebted to them for their vision, leadership, and dedication during the formative years of our community settlement here in Canada, and for their many contributions to the Ismaili Centre Vancouver. I'd also like to thank Nafisa Karim for so masterfully guiding us on our journey during today's event. And we'd like to thank the many volunteers who make programs like today possible, and to you, our audience, for sharing your time with us. I'd like to focus my brief closing remarks on three themes: aspiration, partnership, and permanence. The first is aspiration. The Ismaili Centre Vancouver has been part of the fabric of Burnaby and Vancouver for the past 35 years. It is a center that has been and will remain one of aspiration, of intellectual and cultural exchange, and of artistic creativity and expression. Its courtyard has played host to Vancouver's renowned Indian Summer Festival, its social hall has basked in the wisdom of world-class astronomers, scientists, and historians. And its meeting spaces have reverberated in vibrant debate and dialogue from policymakers from a wide array of backgrounds, including education and law enforcement. It is our aspiration that the center remain at the confluence of critical and creative conversations that are relevant to Canadians from all avenues of life. The second theme is partnership. No event at the Ismaili Center is a product of a one-off relationship. Each event is a culmination of long-standing partnerships and collaboration. That principle of partnership is symbolic of the best of what our country, city, and community have to offer. It is also an ethic that is reflective of not only the center, but also the Ismaili community at large. And the third theme is permanence. The Ismaili Center will remain a landmark in Vancouver's cultural, societal, and intellectual fabric for years, decades, and generations to come. While as time passes, the audience and programming may change, the center's meaning, design, and intent will remain permanently anchored. I'd like to end with a quote from a speech made by His Highness the Aga Khan at the opening ceremony of the Ismaili Center Toronto, the spirit of which is equally relevant to the Ismaili Center Vancouver. He said that the spaces in the center should, quote, be filled with the sounds of enrichment, dialogue, and warm human rapport as Ismailis and non-Ismailis share their lives in a healthy, gregarious spirit. End of quote. Thank you.